Okay, Greg, check your Facebook.
All right, let me do some sharing. Got it.
You ready, Greg?
Whenever you're ready. Whenever
Oh,
you're ready, yes, sir.
okay, cool. And go ahead, Greg.
Welcome, welcome, everyone. It is 6:14 on Monday night, and you're listening to the 214th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour, right here on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. If you're new to the show, I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We provide one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to thrive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. This program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight. Robin is producing from a remote location. So good to see you both. And so good to have you listening from your computers, in your cars, in New Jersey, and honestly, all over the world. I saw two come in from Eastern Europe last week. It's been a month. We have so much to discuss. There's like a million topics tonight, and one real big one that we're going to continue tonight and on through all of Black History Month. It's been a month. We have much to discuss. We'll start tonight with startling data actually on special education inclusion. Is inclusion as preferable as they always said it was to segregated classes? Now, a month ago, we started a report on how Arizona schools were found to punish chronic absenteeism by suspending the kids and keeping them out of class longer. We're going to complete that story tonight. You're going to hear some endings to that. That I think will probably curl your toes. We have an interesting remedy to boost attendance in early childhood parenting classes among at-risk families. That's an interesting segment of the new child welfare way and structure. Our feature tonight is, of course, about the way it appears, at least to me, and there's plenty of evidence to support this, that the races are just pitted against each other all the time for political control and gain. Just let that lay for a couple of seconds, and so you can feel its full impact. I mean, it's been going on forever. I'm sure we didn't invent it, but it's a nasty story, and we're going to look at it from several different perspectives tonight, and we'll revisit it a lot in the coming weeks. Way more pervasive than you realize. And that's not all. Guess what? We have our New Jersey governor signed his siblings' Bill of Rights into law. And we're going to end tonight with a story about anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, rhetoric, and violence. It's a rough time to be, I don't know, different in any way, in any recognizable way. So much is judged right now based on appearance, color, and so if you want to add to the discussion, whether it's positive or negative, you can write in the comments field of my Facebook page, and I will see that comment immediately. If you write into the comments field of another Facebook page where the show is showing, then I might not see that for a couple of days, okay? I understand that we're aware that some of the things we talk about in the show can really trigger deep feelings. So remember 988, man, it's the new number. If you are thinking about harming yourself, talk to someone who can actually help you, okay? Talk to an actual trained peer advocate. And all you have to do is pick up the phone, dial 988. Please, please do that. Do that for me. Do it for you. If you're feeling like harming yourself, 988. If you're looking at us on Facebook or YouTube, please hit all the buttons for me. We need you to like and subscribe and share. Because this is relevant to everyone in your world. These are not topics that are only important to a specific geographic region. They're important to you, where you are. And this needs to be shared. So please, if you're hearing it right now, share what you're hearing right now. If you want to know about child welfare, community involvement, this is where you come to get the whole truth, sorry, and I promise you what you will hear tonight cannot be found on the nightly news. Please stay with Hamilton Radio all night long for the best music. We have an ongoing pledge drive for Hamilton Radio. If you ever get a chance to go to www.hamiltonradio.net, on the welcome screen, you'll see a little button, a little chance to make a donation. And these are people who certainly deserve it. They have supported every nonprofit who's come to them and asked for help in all the time that I've known them. It's a wonderful group of people, and they deserve your support. As always, I want to remind people all over New Jersey about the Bridges to Employment program. The fact is, it simply doesn't get any better than when high school actually comes to you. Think about it, okay? If you can't come to high school, it doesn't matter to me what your challenge is. If you can't come to high school because you don't have the right clothes, because you got bullied, because you moved around a lot and you feel like you're lost in the classroom, if you can't come to high school because maybe you have, anxiety and stuff from things that have happened to you in the past, whatever your reason is, none of that matters for us, because we will bring the high school to you. And actually, I think it is better if you could go to regular high school. I'm going to be honest with you. I love the Bridges to Employment program because I think it serves children, young people who can't come to high school. They just, whatever the reason is, they can't make it in every day, and stick with that conventional program. And so, Bridges removes that obstacle, and Bridges also will follow you if you move. So anyway, if you've ever had foster care involvement and you're between the ages of 16 and 24, think about getting in touch with me about the Bridges to Employment program. We'll help you get your high school equivalency and get you started on a career path where you can earn some actual money. A lot of stuff about education from the Hechinger Report this month. They've ramped up their coverage of child welfare. This by Jill Barshay. Last month, an analysis by the Campbell Collaboration, which is a nonprofit organization that reviews research evidence to help inform public policy, came to some troubling conclusions about special education inclusion. The analysis didn't find clear benefits for students with disabilities who learn alongside their general education peers. The report generated a lot of criticism because the researchers ignored hundreds and hundreds of studies that didn't meet their scientific rigor and based this meta-analysis on just 15 studies that did. However, the researchers were not being arbitrary. What you need to take away from this is there are a lot of problems in the existing evidence base, and maybe it's time to rethink the conventional wisdom that inclusion is always preferable. Certainly something to think about. Now, here's the remaining installments of the story about the Arizona schools where it's called Education Suspended, written by Maria Paletta, Tara Garcia Mathewson, and Fazil Khan. Education Suspended, the analysis of the impact of school absences on Arizona students in the specific area of students being forced to not attend school as a punishment for being consistently absent, which is, sort of like saying don't come at all, right? It defeats the purpose. So, the rub being that schools punished chronic absenteeism and sometimes lateness with suspension. Okay, so here's a story from Phoenix about a gentleman named Guadalupe Hernandez, and his attendance problems started in kindergarten. This by Tara Garcia Mathewson and Maria Paletta specifically. So this boy, Guadalupe, who has 2 attention disorders and oppositional defiant disorder, and he often refused to sit still for circle time. He experienced separation anxiety while away from his grandmother, Frances Duarte, who raised him. He'd spent his days distracted from lessons, wishing he was home with her. Guadalupe started asking Duarte, whom he calls Mama, to let him skip school. And frequently she did, If a little kid begs you enough and you're the grandmother, you're going to let that go. Eventually, school administrators responded to his absences with punishment. Guadalupe said they gave him an in-school suspension, keeping him away from his classmates for an entire day. The next year in first grade, he said administrators escalated the punishment to out-of-school suspension, temporarily barring him from school altogether. Suspending students for missing class, whether it's because they showed up late, cut midday, or were absent from school entirely, is a controversial tactic. At least 11 states fully ban the practice, and 6 more prohibit out-of-school suspensions to some extent for attendance violations. That leaves schools in much of the country, including Arizona, free to punish most students for missing learning time by forcing them to miss even more learning time. Students may miss class for any number of reasons, including transportation problems, family responsibilities, or disengagement from school. Suspending them, experts say, not only fails to remedy these underlying challenges, but, as with Guadalupe, can lead to further disengagement and worsen the attendance problems the discipline was meant to address. Suspensions can also contribute to new problems, such as lower academic performance, higher dropout rates. The consequences can extend beyond school. Research has found with suspensions linked to lower college enrollment rates and increased involvement with the criminal justice system. Nationwide, critics of the punishment cite missed class time as a key problem with it. But many districts continue to suspend kids for missing school or showing up a few minutes late to class. Guadalupe missed so much school that when he did show up, he couldn't follow what was happening in class. Math will kill you that way. If you miss math and you fall out of step with math, which is purely incremental from start to finish of your learning experience, then it's no surprise. So Guadalupe remembers a 2-day out-of-school suspension in first grade. He didn't go the following day after the suspension was over. The suspension, he said, made him want to go to school even less. So Arizona places pressure on schools to reduce chronic absenteeism, informed by research that says an average of 2 absences per month can create a tipping point in early literacy, performance on standard tests, and dropout rates. So 2 absences per month can be the tipping point in literacy performance on standard tests and dropout rates. That's pretty nasty. Colorado River Union High School District near the Nevada border is among the most punitive districts in the sample. It serves fewer than 2,000 students, but assigned 351 out-of-school suspensions for attendance-related violations over the past 5 school years. Most of those suspensions happened at Mojave High School, where Principal Gina Covert said the school has a homeless liaison, but uses a policy of escalating discipline. So, escalating discipline would be where they don't necessarily start with out-of-school suspension, but, little by little, the more times first you let it go, but they warn you and stuff like that, and then it escalates until the point where, now you're out. Several current former school officials Lucky Arzivos. He's the principal of the Somerton High School and Yuma Union High School District, which serves 11,000 students, described a similar policy of gradually escalating discipline and said he considers suspension in response to poor attendance a last resort. Now, several current and former school officials disagree. During a suspension, they said students don't get the support to change bad habits. They don't get help with barriers that might keep them from school, such as family and work commitments. Suspensions similarly fail to address school-based issues that can contribute to poor attendance, like bullying or academic troubles. In Guadalupe's case, suspensions added to his time out of class. I guess it was perfect, right? While doing nothing to change his academic trajectory. Guadalupe was consistently failing all his classes. He struggled to read and do grade level math and couldn't follow what was being taught in science and social studies. And, saying he was struggling to do grade level math, unless he was a math whiz. And I know some kids I've met who are just really, really good at math, so they managed to hold on. But otherwise, he wasn't struggling to do grade level math. He was like totally underwater. What they never understood, Duarte said, was because Guadalupe hadn't been in school for so long, he didn't know what was going on at school. He didn't know his work. There was nobody there to help him with it. All right, so, does this have a bright side? There's some clever schools who are doing something. The pandemic took its toll, right? Strict quarantine periods and policies demanding students stay home at any hint of a cough or runny nose tormented schools even after they reopened. Students got out of the habit of getting to school on time or going consistently at all. So more of this is by Tara Garcia Mathewson and Maria Paletta. By the 21-22 school year, districts and charter networks across the country were facing what many dubbed a crisis of absenteeism. Students weren't showing up, so there. In Arizona, many responded as they had prior to the academic, with punishment, maintaining and even increasing the share of students they suspended for missing class. Agua Fria Union High School District, meanwhile, moved in the opposite direction. The 9,200 student district used to be one of the state's top suspenders for attendance, reducing their number from 409 days for attendance violations to 36 days. Educators there and in other districts that avoid using attendance-related suspensions say that doing so requires a two-pronged approach, focusing on making school a place where students want to be while approaching absenteeism as a problem to solve rather than as a behavior calling for punishment. They contend this strategy, not suspensions, is what actually improves student attendance, and it avoids the damaging consequences of blocking kids from class. In some districts, school leaders have forged relationships with community partners willing to buy alarm clocks for students to help them get up and out of their homes on time. Others describe principals picking up students in their own cars to get them to class. I offered to do that today. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I offered to do that, and I was refused my offer. Because you know what? You just can't do everything. You can only do so much. Now, in other cases where academic struggles or bullying was to blame, tutoring and counseling helped re-engage students and keep them in class. Now, see, in Bridges, we just try not to do all that stuff. There isn't the politics and punishing of people. I'm coming at this from a trauma-informed background. And I know that if you've been out of school for a long time, it's almost like if you have substance, abuse issues, it can take 7 or 8 tries to just get back in the groove of doing that sort of thing. And that's for real. It's just for real. And we help you get through it all the way. But I'll tell you this, you can do it 4 times faster using our methods. So don't be afraid to start, okay? If you have any history in foster care, you're in New Jersey, between the ages of 16 and 24, you qualify for the Bridges to Employment program. Email me directly, greg@ageoutangels.org. Interesting article by Jackie Mader that has to do with there's the whole new thing. New Jersey's doing it big time. It's the way the federal money from the Family First Prevention Act is being spent towards early childhood, teaching mothers how to raise children and trying to keep families intact. It's a really wonderful attempt, I will say that, and I'm sure it will help some people, but always the issue comes up. If this sort of a thing, when you're in the hospital and you're giving birth, and then suddenly it's offered to you, and by the way, this stranger will now come to your house and show you how to be a parent. how many people are actually going to take advantage of that? And personally, I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to that. I think all of these programs like this are wonderful and they will help a certain percentage of people. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. But here's a clever study published in the Journal of Pediatrics in December, which looked at Smart Beginnings, a family support program in low-income communities aimed at promoting responsive parent-child interactions during infancy and toddlerhood. Isn't that what we're all interested in, right? The program combines two separate parent support elements that have independently been proven to improve parenting. Video interaction during well-child visits within pediatric offices and brief home visits for select families in need of more support. So you see what's happened there is that the actual reaching out to this family is done during well child visits in the pediatric office. Okay? So by doing it that way, researchers found the program significantly promoted parents engaging in cognitively stimulating activities with their children. It can't be bad to engage more people in that program, leading to an increase in talking to children, reading with children, use of rich language, deliberately exposing children to a broad vocabulary throughout their daily activities. It's worth a try, you know? It's totally worth a try. And let me also tell you briefly about our Governor Murphy signs a bill establishing New Jersey's Siblings Bill of Rights in an effort to maintain sibling relationships in the child welfare system. Governor Phil Murphy today signed a long name of a bill. It's the Siblings Bill of Rights in New Jersey. The bill, which will take effect immediately, will supplement the Child Placement Bill of Rights, adding a number of provisions to strengthen sibling bonds in the child welfare system during placement. The bill aims to ensure children involved with this Division of Child Protection and Permanency in the Department of Children and Families who wish to maintain relationships with their siblings are supported by the department in doing so. The bill recognizes that children placed outside their home have several rights related to maintaining sibling relationships, including the right to remain actively involved in the lives of their siblings and, where appropriate, to have their voice heard in the permanency planning process for their siblings. In addition, the bill includes the following rights for children placed outside their homes. And there's a big one. Pay attention, man, because there's a big one coming up that I was thinking about immediately as soon as I read this. Okay, ready? Here we go. To have access to phone calls and virtual visits between face-to-face visits with their sibling. Remember this one, to have access to phone calls and virtual visits between face-to-face visits. To be placed in the closest proximity possible to other siblings who are not in out-of-home placement, or if placement together is not possible, when it is in the best interest of the child. To have recommendations and wishes of the child and each sibling who participates in the permanency planning decision documented in the DCF case record and provided to the court. To know or be made aware by DCF of expectations for continued contact with the child's siblings after an adoption or transfer of custody, subject to the approval of the adoptive parents or caregivers. To be promptly informed about changes in sibling placements or permanency planning goals. To be actively involved in the lives of the child's siblings, birthdays, holidays, other milestones. Okay, this is the one, okay? This is the one that relates to the first one. To not be denied sibling visits as a result of behavioral consequences when residing in a resource family home or congregate care setting. Bang! You can't use, if you don't behave, I won't let you talk to your brother. And anyone who ever did that, well, you know what I'm thinking. And finally, to be provided updated contact information for all siblings, at least annually, including a current phone number, address, and email address, unless not in the best interests of one or more siblings. You do have to draw some distinctions there. And I will tell you, you know, that it sounds, all these things sound wonderful. And Clara, who might be joining us in just a second when we get to topics that are more in her area of expertise, did write, bang, absolutely, this is an exploitation of familiar bonds for the use of power. Indeed it is. Yes, it's terrible. Terrible way they would punish people by withholding meetings with their own family. if they didn't fly right. So sad. So yeah, Clara, if you ever want to jump on, my friend Clara Ross is here. I've been trying to coax her into um, coming on the show for, what is it, Clara, 3 years? And it's because I met her 3 years ago and fell in love with her instantly. Her knowledge is wonderful and substantive, and she can articulate it well. And I like having friends like that. So Clara, if you want to unmute, if you want to let yourself be seen on video, all of those things are there for you as we talk a little bit about how races. Are you there, Clara?
I am.
Oh, good. It's nice to see you. So, you know, what I need to talk about a lot between now and throughout Black History Month is, you know, what I've noticed in the last few years as this polarization has really festered,
Yeah.
and proliferated. The pitting of the races against each other, and what I've noticed personally, like, you know, in my world, in my circles, is how a lot of my white friends, and by white friends I mean, you know, people I've known sort of my whole life, people I went to college with, so, and people who I know as you know, basically good people. We were certainly all liberals once, you know, or at least thought we were, right? That's what we called ourselves. Where they find themselves on the side of the politics that wants to just squelch everything that isn't, you know, just totally make sure there's an upper class and a lower class, and that's that. No middle class, wants to wipe out the middle class. Anyway, so
there's a book that comes to mind. I think the last name of the guy is Howard. And in the book, he talks about, he's basically trying to identify how he feels that white teachers could take time to kind of reevaluate how they discern their ways within the classroom, within the education system. And the title of it alone is so powerful, because the title of it is, we can't teach what we don't know. And when you say that we're being pitted against, you know, people that thought that they were liberal, I think that, you know, you have to pay attention to the fact that we can't ignore the evolving relationship between education and social change. And we're all finding ourselves in that. So I'm not as quick to say that it almost sounds voluntary. I think that, you know, you have to really be able to evaluate and self-assess, you know, are these people impacted by the social change where they're crippled? You know, when we become in a situation where there's a lot of anxiety and fear, you know, we see the movies where everybody's falling down. Oh, if that was me, I wouldn't fall down. No, but in this new cycle that we're in, and this hostility of social change, I think some people kind of freeze.
So how are you defining that social change?
Well, the social change of the climate. Like, okay, there was a time when, you know, during the civil rights, right? Everything was visible. It was apparent. You know, you could see, you know, racism, you could see discrimination, you know, but you really can't see it anymore. And, you know, it's difficult for people to stand on the side and say, listen, there's systemic issues here. You know, listen, there's discrimination and biases implemented within the system. It's not voluntary. It's not purposeful oftentimes. But if you continue to fail to recognize that it exists, and you're in opposition to the recognition, and you're not being asked to say, well, could you show us? Could you present to us examples of how we're overlooking it, of what the trauma, as you said, you know, many of us are familiar with, trauma background. We understand that the discrimination and the harm is causing harm, irreparable harm, to many students of color, many students who are disabled, but because there's no intentionality, oftentimes people will quickly label you, and trust me, I know, as the troublemaker, as the person that wants to just keep something going, when in fact, it's really a failure of the systems to say, hey, we need concrete examples, and they're out there more than enough, and say, and also too, to be able to say, let me take the burden away from you that you're not responsible.
So
you're not responsible.
If I understand correctly, then, if I may, you're saying that in earlier times, like, I don't know, we'll say arbitrarily the 1940s or something like that, it was really easy to identify the bias because there were actually signs for whites only, for colors only. You could read the signs, right?
Absolutely. It was evident. It was clear.
And now the it's sort of more insidious. It's under the surface and finds its way into affecting the lives of children in school.
Absolutely. Because remember,
frequently not on purpose. I don't know any people who ever went to school to like harm a kid.
No,
I'm sure weirdos exist, but I'd never met one.
Absolutely not. I don't think that there's. I don't think there's. Now, don't get me wrong. I would say I would be willing to not talk in academic terms and say there's a probability, higher than possibility, that there is some intentionality. These are used systems, and wherever there's used systems, there's a balance of power, okay? And there's always a struggle there. And unfortunately, little brown children and disabled children and other minorities and disadvantaged can find themselves in this power. And the power becomes more than the plight, which is supposed to be education. Remember, when slavery was evident in America, it wasn't just humans being bad. It was also humans being blind, right? The blindness of it. And so now I think it's more so that because, again, we can't see it and we feel like we've abandoned it, there's laws there to protect. There's laws there to protect people in special education. There's laws there to protect against bias and discrimination. And those laws have been there for a very long time. How far are we removed from Jim Crow and Plessy Ferguson? How far are we removed? But we still find ourselves here, and there's still a wealth of experiences out there, that children are being traumatized in these systems that are impacting, and we talk about the child and the child. I was listening when you were talking earlier about the special education, and I was listening about Guadalupe's story and his grandmother's story. And those are countless out there as well. Because at the end of the day, it's really not so much, the child's behavior on his education, but we're not really looking at the child's education on his behavior. Right? Because if I send my child to school, I can't protect my child from what occurs, what he hears, what he sees, what he experiences. And to think of, Guadalupe's experience, to have anxiety, to be removed from his grandmother where he feels safe. And, I have a special needs daughter, and I know for her particular malady, safety and security is very important. It's like, it's the most important thing really for me when she's inside the educational building. She has her challenges, but a parent wants to know that that is in place. And we also find, which you also touched on at Guadalupe, is that the severity of punitive response to behavior on minority children and special education children, especially those in minority, is it's undeniable. That you could not bring a study to me that says no, we don't find any imbalance there.
Right. Yeah. Now, when a lot of the kids that I deal with are they're adolescents. They're not like the early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But so when they're going through puberty and stuff like that, and they're going through that phase when they're trying to find their identity. Right. That's when you establish your identity in that time. Apparently, the data shows Black, Latino, and Native American students are frequently overrepresented. This is going to come as a total surprise to you, Clara. They're overrepresented among those blocked from class for missing class.
No, that doesn't come. You know, I'm going to tell you a fast story. I got to tell you, I'll tell it in 15 seconds. I have a young man I know very, 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 very well. And he was in a district, and I won't put the district on blast. Okay. And this particular young man's IEP he wasn't a severe, but it was inability to focus. He just needed help, or it was mostly disorganization, but the inability to focus. So this young man would continually forget his identification for school. And at that time, they were really big on, post 9/11, you got to wear your ID, you got to wear your ID. And this young man kept being pulled out, put in ISS because he didn't bring his ID. And the suggestion by his parent was, let's have 2 IDs. One that stays in school, right? But and then they resolved it that way. However, when this young man went for a state of New Jersey job and they had to interview and look into his background, they had to ask the parent and him, why do you have so many infractions in ISS in your file? And he was shocked because to his parents' knowledge and to his knowledge, he had no file from punitive things that had occurred while he was in school. Mm-hmm. But come to find out, they were putting and filling his file with indications that he had to be put in ISS, but there was no description that it was as simple as not having an ID. That, I hope, gives you a very small, example, but yet powerful, how these things can impact someone, because it's a big deal, later on.
And that in high school, things like that can actually come to define a person.
Absolutely.
That becomes the overriding factor. Absolutely. She's the girl who always drops her lunch tray on the floor. He's the guy who always has his brother's sneakers, whatever it happens to be. You get defined by those things.
Yes, you do.
When you're in high school. And you know what? Rich white people have anxiety too. They really do. They just hide it way better and get better drugs and everything else.
Yeah.
But anxiety is frequently caused by, I believe I'm witnessing this every day, that anxiety is caused by this remarkable trauma that some of the children in foster care have endured. And that's just a fact.
Oh, yeah.
But also in the world, there's a percentage of people who are going to have depression and anxiety. They're going to come in all shapes and all colors and all genders and all pronouns, but they're going to have anxiety. And as a culture, we don't seem to give a damn, really,
Yeah, we really have to give, because I'm going to be honest with you, none of us are insulated from a loved one, from someone we know, from someone we sit next to every day. It is our problem because none of us are immune to being familiar, whether it's in our family, with people that we work with people that we mentor, with what's happening now with mental illness, what's happening now with depression. But what we should be is we really should be more outraged and more active in trying to understand that we know that no one individual may be responsible, but we're looking at the information and the experiences, and we know that these systems that are supposed to educate our children and have equal access to that education and equal environment to that education is not happening that way.
Absolutely. Now the trick to keep you in your place, is to make sure that there is a poor white working class.
Oh, absolutely.
Those numbers, you know what, you see what I'm saying here, right? Those numbers, you can't match those numbers. And that's what I found. People that maybe I knew for years or years ago who I reunited with on Facebook or whatever, right? Who you know, basically good people, but they're working their butts off. They're working hand to mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not putting together the pieces that they actually are privileged because they can work their butts off.
Mm-hmm.
It's the lack of privilege that where you don't even get that job,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you don't even get that much. But you know what? They're just trying to keep their heads above water. They're not thinking how lucky they are,
Absolutely.
you know, right now to have.
And you can understand that. That's what that
Yeah.
goes to the heart. That goes to the heart, Greg, of if we could just extrapolate the intentionality. If we could just extrapolate, we know it's not your fault. It's, you know, you oftentimes hear people say, well, that's old, you know, why are you bothering me? Or why are you saying that these things are occurring? And those are people that came way before me. That's not our heritage anymore. You know, that's not who we are. But no one is saying that. But if you listen, that's what they're saying. And, you know, we can be guilty. The other side of the coin can be guilty of not understanding our role and what we need to do in hearing someone feel that whether they're portraying themselves as a victim, they're a victim, and they're a victim of the accusatory idea that they belong to something by the color of their skin, right? That they don't want to be associated with. And that's painful. And we have to recognize that. That's important, I think.
Do you think people feel disgraced in their race?
I don't think that they feel disgraced in their race. I don't think so. I don't think disgrace is the word. I think that there is a disdain when they reflect on the heritage and the history of their ancestors. Mm-hmm. I believe that.
Yeah.
But I think where the connection is missing is that how do you get them to understand and say, okay, I am not a part of that. I don't agree with that. I feel and I really do believe that that was wrong. However, I can't see how it's relevant to what is going on today. And so I always call it the Hansel and Gretel. I'm going to hag you. Okay, Hansel and Gretel. And that is, I'm going to leave you a little breadcrumb, little by little. And the most powerful way for a person to understand something is to allow them to come to the understanding on their own, right? If we constantly tell people about something, it's nearly not as powerful. And by powerful, I mean, you have to, transformation is not just, you know, it's not just a change of a way. It's not just an understanding. Transformation takes the understanding of what it is that person's role is, of what it is for them to recognize and say, I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it, but now I do, because you have to separate them because they're in the system that they can't change either. They can't change the color of their skin, but you have to separate them and free them of the burden of feeling responsible, that you're looking at them as though they are a part of it based on the color of their skin. And it's very mirrored to an African American or minorities looking at them saying, well, you got to not attach me to the images that you've been portrayed and seen all these years. And so we're both kind of locked in a mirror image, but I'm no means saying that the experience is as detrimental, but I think that is really important. It would probably be in my top 3 things to really help, get try to turn some of this racism and discrimination around in the next 100 years. Because as crazy as it sounds, it's been many, many, many years since civil rights. And here we are, you know?
Change is like making a left turn on the Titanic. I know.
Yeah.
I know it is frustrating. Now, I also want to point out to our listeners that this is not an America sucks problem.
No.
This is worldwide. I found this interesting British website called Runnymede, and they are talking about what they refer to as the left behind white working class. Okay, so what happens is essentially, there is a poor, economically poor, group of white people everywhere, and they allow them to remain that way. And then when resources are allocated to try to lift up all the boats, they say, oh my goodness, look at all these white people who have no education or something. All the money gets spent. Mm-hmm. In those areas. Stats come back, a couple of years later. Look how we increased high school graduation by 27%. And it all happens among one privileged class of people. And this also comes into play regarding a specific issue that I have been talking about with other people recently about children who can't afford school lunch. Okay, we have this group of thousands and thousands of children across the country whose families earn income that's just outside the range that would get them free lunch. Mm-hmm. So they don't qualify for free lunch, but they can't necessarily afford to pay either. So these are now debtor grade school children who are in debt to their school cafeteria. And so if they're in debt, if they're in arrears, I guess at some point they take away their pencils. No, they give them some, peanut butter and jelly lunch or something like that. So that way everyone in the cafeteria knows that they're the poor kids who can't afford lunch. And so they're getting the peanut butter and jelly sandwich while the children who actually have less than they do are enjoying the full lunch, right? And the whole thing is lopsided. And the point of that is simply that this is something that happens all around the world. Mm-hmm. And we are actually one of the nicest countries when it comes to that, because other countries, France, Britain, they were not the melting pot that we always were intended to be, mm-hmm. right? They were always, there's a French population, there's a London there's a Welsh population, there's a German population. And when borders started to, have refugees come from other places and immigration and things like that, as transportation became more viable, mm-hmm. right? They've spent the last 300 or 400 years also using slavery when they wanted to, right? But they've spent the last 300 or 400 years trying to keep their, what they consider to be their bloodlines pure, right? By making sure they stepped on the necks of every minority who's come mm-hmm. their way. So this is not just something we do here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But that's very similar to what you were offering before about when people will say, well, there was a comedian the other day, and I came across something he was doing on racism, and I thought it was really interesting when a person in his audience, because he had like an open mic, and he said, and the person said, well, people keep talking about this white privilege, but I'm a white poor person, and I'm struggling. I'm barely making it to pay my rent. I'm barely making it to pay a car. I've had to drive without car insurance just because I'm not able to really pay that, but I still got to get to work. I yelled out to white privilege and it didn't answer. So I'm wondering what this privilege is. And see, those can be conundrums that we get caught up in, because if you think about Martin Luther King, and I like to use this all the time because when you think of Martin Luther King, you think of the civil rights movement. You think that he led and he did, the charge against racial discrimination. But he was a poverty man. He always said, made no hidden agenda. He was for poverty. He was for economic equality. He understood. And what happens is that in our country, so great, where there has been this, unwritten rule of privilege based on the color of one's skin, then there still has to be something to separate. There always had to be an upper echelon, and the only way to have an upper echelon, to have a bottom one. And so even though you might be suffering poverty as similar as the poverty to a person of color, it's not equal poverty, as crazy as that sounds.
That's correct.
And right?
Absolutely.
And so, but poverty and economic stance, to me, in this country, and especially right now, is as vital a conversation as racism and discrimination, because the economic imbalance and the economic crises is the fuel to racism. It will fuel biases, because there's always that idea that I have to separate from them. So if you're not, if everything else is telling you privilege, and you're not up here with your white counterparts that are affluent, you're down here with the ones that everybody else is supposedly the privileged against and better than. It can become a construct,
It's totally confusing for people, right? It puts people in a position where they say, look, you know what? I really do feel for others. I do.
Yes.
But charity begins at home.
There you go.
Right? So, what is it that you want me to do? And of course, there's, as we sit here and theorize about things, we understand fully that there are two totally different kinds of poverty, because if you only define poverty by the economic data, by the numbers, well, then you have two people of two different colors who both have $10 in their pocket. They're equally as poor, right?
No way.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, equality. They both have $10 in their pockets. We've arrived.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is that there are elements of privilege that the white guy has in that situation that the black guy doesn't. And that's a fact. I mean, there are simple things like, for example, if I have to get to the food stamp office to pick up my food stamps and I have no money to get there, if I stick my thumb out to hitchhike as a white person, I will have a much better chance of being picked up and transported to the damn food stamp office.
Yes.
It's not the same kind of poverty, right? The black person sticks his hand out and people go, ooh, call the police.
Mm-hmm.
What's he doing? He's not supposed to be doing that here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was telling people that if you ever notice the difference between when an FBI raids a white person's house and when the FBI raids the house of a person of color, when they raid a white person's house, the TV cameras are on that white person outside of the house going, I am appalled. How could they do such a thing? Don't they know what an upstanding, I will sue. They do that. The black person says, you meant the house next door. Why did you shoot my husband? Yes. My son or something like that. You weren't even in the right house, for crying out loud. That's what, and it's consistent. It's really consistent. Every time you see something like that happen, it sort of happens the same way. And it's really frustrating. Mm-hmm. We didn't get through half of this stuff, Will you come back again, please?
Absolutely. I absolutely will. Special education is dear to my heart. Racial trauma and education is as dear. And they go hand in hand as well,
Yeah. the poverty, he could also get one of a zillion hotel rooms or apartments that the black guy can't get. That's another one.
Absolutely. You know, it's so funny
Where
you
you
say
can
that.
do, right?
It's funny that you say that because I had that experience with my parents. As crazy as it sounds, I'm a biracial person, and my mother's from Italian descent, and my father's African American. And just not, well, I guess 30 years ago, they had that very issue where she went, looked at the housing, and they had her sign all the papers. She was good to go. She never brought my dad. And then when she brought my dad, they were like, oh, you know, we're so sorry. We double booked the apartment. Anyway, it's small town upstate New York. And the truth of the matter is we ended up going to Deputy Attorney General, explaining it to him. He took on the case and they won. But there's so much going on out here. And part of it, I think, is just getting so big. I mean, think about it. Systems are getting bigger. They're not getting smaller. People are becoming more populous, not less. And so it's just getting so big. It's like the only way to really start to manage all this is we're going to have to micromanage it, but we need more boots on the ground so that we have more power in our groups to be able to micromanage, right? To be able to represent, and so that individuals, and I do mean individuals, have a place to go to that's real and tangible, you know, as opposed to, oh, you know, I'm going to refer you to them, but little do I know they're going to refer you to them, and they're going to refer you to him, and he's going to refer you. And, you know, and people are very dejected. They've lost confidence in the help system. Mm-hmm. They really have. And, you know, and I'm be honest with you, that kind of perpetuated me to start doing some of the things I've been trying to do, because I really realized it's just not there. It's just not there. And it needs to be, because it's not about me. It's about the young people. It's about the next generation. We're only as strong as our legacy.
Maybe you and I will start it together. What do you say?
Okay.
All right. Join me next week, will you? That's all the time we have. I am so sorry. My thanks to Robin for producing. My thanks to Ruben for producing and engineering. My thanks to Mozart for writing all that wonderful music 300 years ago so that we could play it today. Stay safe, everybody. Until next week,
Greg.
Let's make this week the best week ever. Good night, everyone.
Absolutely.
Good night, Clara. Thank you.
Good night.